Morning, Branson. How are you?
I'm good. How about yourself?
Doing okay, thanks. As far as I know, anyway.
Well, as long as you woke up, that's doing better than some people in the world today. So,
Isn't that the truth? Although you could argue I'm not that awake. Man, you got some gear out there. Geez, what is that? A mixing panel or mixing board?
yeah, mixing board, beat machines, DJ setup, uh,
Wow.
content creation. I just got the Mevo cam.
Oh, really? That's the, is that, do you have three cameras
Uh,
or
I
one or
just
how
I just
many
have
are
the
you
one.
using?
I have the one right now. I have the little one, but
Yeah,
it'll follow me just like this one because this one, like if I move out, it'll follow me. So.
I got you. That's cool. I know some people that use that Mevo camera at churches, and they'll have two or three of them set up and allows them to switch between the different cameras in a church service. That's where I'm familiar with it. So, hey
Yep.
Trey, how you doing? All right.
I'm good. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay.
Good, good.
As far as I know, right? That's what we're all doing, I guess.
Yeah, I enjoyed the class yesterday. That was very, very good.
Good. I'm glad, and realize that that's also available to to watch again or whatever. So
Where are those
it's a
located?
resource.
Are they on the website?
Yeah, if you go to accelerateworld.org and go to member resources, you'll see. Uh, well, let's see. I'm not giving you good information. We have a YouTube channel, and I'm not sure it's set up yet. Grant can answer that, but the idea is we try to take all of our classes and copy them on our YouTube channel so that you can see them again if you want to, or make up if you've missed one. So I know that's something we're working on. This particular one today is the first one that I'm streaming live to YouTube at the same time. So I know this will get there. The problem we have with YouTube, if we use something like yesterday, Simon Sinek's video, even though it's a
You're
free
black.
video, if you broadcast on a live stream, they will accuse you of using copyrighted property. So I didn't stream yesterday to YouTube because of that, but we will upload those videos to our YouTube channel, which is different than live streaming. So you'll be able to see them there, hopefully soon.
Yeah, I told my wife I think she would benefit from yesterday's class, so I might show it to her.
Yeah, and of course she's also welcome to sit in anytime into class, or also watch the recordings like we're talking about. So
Okay.
happy to do that. All right.
I've showed a few of my clients the Simon video before. It really works.
Yeah. There's a whole in the whole world, I guess, I don't know if the right word is self-help or whatever you want to call it, but there's a pretty famous book that some of you might be familiar with. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And it's somebody called Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl was a prisoner in a concentration camp during World War II. And he survived it. And so what he did is he wrote a book that basically tried to explain why some people survived the concentration camp and others didn't. And it's really fascinating. But he also, during his life, he also talked a lot about why you do something. And if you have a really strong why, you can pretty much survive almost anything that happens to you, because that North Star, that purpose will shine through no matter what happens to you. And that's something I learned from him, from that book. One of the really, really great things about that book that I personally have found. So in the book, he talks about all these different things that happened to people in the concentration camp. And he was trying to find out, like I said, what was it that enabled some of them to survive, and whereas most did not. And what he boiled it down to was something that I don't think any of us give much thought to. And that is the idea that as long as you retain the ability to choose your reaction to whatever input that you're getting, any stimulus, it could be violence, it could be whispers, it could be almost anything that you get as input, as long as you retain the ability to decide how you're going to respond to that input, you will be fine. And the ones that he noticed in the camp that gave up that, they just basically did what they thought their captors wanted them to do, as opposed to deciding for themselves. And he said in almost every case, those individuals did not make it. They had not retained that ability. And they basically they actually, the way he put it, he said they died even before they died, because they gave up that ability to make that choice. So I've always enjoyed that. I think it's kind of cool. So let me, okay. Thought captors wanted them to do, as opposed to deciding for themselves. Sorry, I've got to turn my YouTube off here. Okay, there we go. I wonder why that was echoing. Now I know, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Today we're going to talk about getting to know your customers. And we're going to start using the Techstars materials, which are also under member resources. It's called Entrepreneur's Toolkit. So you'll find a lot of information there as well. So we're going to start off with kind of an intro to that. See if I can do this here. Share screen, and hopefully this one works. Okay, hopefully everyone can see my screen okay. That'd be great. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Yes.
Good.
Okay, great. We'll start out with this short trailer that will give you an idea.
Founder and CEO of Nikola Power. We're a clean energy technology company solving one of the biggest problems out there, which is this need and desire to shift to 100% renewable energy. Mentor-driven leadership, mentor-driven coaching is powerful.
When I look back at what I did at Rally, we went too wide too fast and spent years trying to clean that up and never really cleaned it up. If you'd been more empathetic in the process, you could have ridden that entire curve all the way up.
The interesting part is they're really working on the business. What customer am I trying to solve for, and why do I wake up every day, and who am I serving? My name is J.W. Postal.
Have an engineering degree or some type of hard sciences degree. Show of hands. All right, so that's most of us in the room. I have an engineering degree. We've played this game 5,000 times by the time we get our degree, which is some authority figure comes to you with a problem, says there's one known solution, and your grade depends on you answering that one known solution. So we got really good at this. We're really trained at doing this well. The problem in entrepreneurship is there's no given problem to you. The challenge is to figure out what the problem is, not figuring out what the solution is. So what this session is going to help you do is, instead of figuring out the one right solution that your grade or the future of your company depends on, it's figuring out the problems, the questions to ask to help you understand how to build the right product for your customers. I think Einstein captured this really well when he said, the formulation of a problem is often more essential than its solution. And the interesting thing that he would do is, if he got stuck trying to figure something out, he wouldn't bang his head harder on figuring out the solution. He would say, I've probably framed this wrong. Let me go back and reframe the problem. And he would put energy into that, knowing that that would unlock the solution or the answer. So our typical approach when we build products, when we build companies, is we start out with some intention, vision, the sort of lofty goal, the place we want to get our business, and we jump straight to building the solution. Really common among engineers or people who are used to building a lot of things, like they get their joy and fulfillment out of building. First place we go is to build. This can be really dangerous in early stage startups because the likelihood you're going to build the wrong thing is really high. So there's a missing crucial step there that can save you sometimes years and years of hardship and toil. There was one company that I was a part of, one of the startups I was a part of. We spent almost 3 years building a product. I'm not proud of this. Building a product, winning tons of awards for the technology. We shipped the thing and no one cared about it. We barely even made the money we invested on it back. And the fundamental thing was that we got the problem wrong. We never sat down and asked the question, what is the underlying fundamental problem here we're trying to solve? We built amazing technology for a problem that didn't exist, which is a real bummer to invest your life, or at least 3 years of your life in that. So hopefully these tools will help you avoid that. In my mind, it all starts with empathy. So I want to give you a little bit of a just light guide on what empathy is and how it works in our brains. So let's say that you just happen to have a functional MRI machine, and you brought one of your customers in and had them describe an experience that they're having. Their brains would light up on the functional MRI machine pretty much this way. These centers of the brains would get very active in burning off sugar. If you put you or somebody else in a functional MRI machine right next to them, and all they're doing is listening to that customer explain their experience, their brains would light up in very similar ways. This is a process of mirror neurons. Our brains are hardwired to take the position of others, have empathy for them, and understand their intent and where they're coming from. Our brains do this naturally. Problem is, we often ignore that part of our brain, or we don't even give ourselves the chance to have empathy where we can connect our brains with our customers and understand what's really going on in their world. But empathy isn't enough. You also have to have insight. Because if you're building a company that's from scratch, doing something new, your insights will allow you to go in places other people may have not ever thought possible. So you can discover a solution space that perhaps no one else has solved. Or you know that there's a possibility of something that's possible that no one else has seen. Or you can reframe the situation in a way that allows you to create a very large business. And when you combine those, empathy plus insights, that allows you to frame a problem. Because it can be dangerous to solve exactly word for word what the customer asks you to solve. It's your insights that allows you to break away from that, create something different or something revolutionarily better. And that's what you can build really powerful businesses around. This works pretty simply. You sit down and you interview people. The way that I find that this works really well, so what this is an actual interview happening, is you've got one person on the red couch there, that's the person being interviewed, and you've got two people conducting the interview. One person here on the right is asking the questions, the person in the middle is taking notes. And the person taking notes isn't just taking notes about what the other person says, they're taking notes about what they're intuiting. They're connecting with that person being interviewed. So if that person feels something like, this is a little bit weird, or what was that reaction, or wow, I'm feeling really excited in this moment, or I sense dread at this part of the interview, take those in the notes. Also take notes on the person doing the interview, because hopefully you're not doing just one of these, you're gonna do 40, 50, 100 of these, and you wanna get better with each interview. So that's why it's really important to have two people. Doing these interviews is super hard if you're doing it alone. If you get really good at it and you've done a lot of interviews, then you can kind of go it alone and take notes, conduct the interview, sort of get into this Zen moment, but it's really, really hard. So when you first start this out, make sure you're doing 2 people interviewing 1 person. Now, often when I help companies with this, I'll say, okay, now go out and do 20, 30, 40 interviews. And usually a clever entrepreneur will say, cool, well, I'm going to put 40 people in the room, or I'm going to send out a survey to 40 people, and that gets me my 40. The rule of thumb here is always interview 1 other person, and the ideal situation is when you can see the other person's pupils dilate. That's when you know you're in an environment that's conducive to a really good interview. Well, why is that? Because our bodies are picking up on the bodily reactions, not just what they're saying. So doing these over the phone, really bad, because you can't get that sense of what's going on. Doing interviews over email, completely useless. Doing interviews where there's 10 or 20 people in the room with you, also, in my opinion, completely useless. Because what happens there, like a focus group, let's say you've got 10 people in the room, usually within about 30 to 90 seconds, the most vocal person in the room will bias everybody else. And so what will start happening is you're hearing 7, 8 people agree with what you're saying, or they're all agreeing with each other, and you think, wow, these 7 people are really having the same problem. The reality is there's probably 1 person that's vocal, may or may not even have the problem, and the other 6, 7 people are just joining in. So that's why focus groups are so dangerous to do at the early stage. Later stage, as you're testing, fine-tuning go-to-market, there's chances there that they work okay. But early stage, please don't do focus groups. Please don't send out email surveys. Please don't send out other type of 5, 10-second click surveys. Take the time, 20, 30 minutes to sit down with a potential customer and really understand their world. Now, once you are getting ready for those, I've got a worksheet here called the Empathy Interview Planner, and this will help you prepare for these empathy interviews. We're going to take a little bit of time here in a minute and practice some of this. So we'll get some hands-on with this, but I want to give you a real quick tour of it. In the upper left-hand corner, talk about your intention. What are you trying to learn? Why are you doing this? Next box is reaching your users or customers. Where are you going to find them? What are you going to say to them to try to get them to schedule an interview? A pro tip here is if you're really struggling to find people to even interview, that's a really good sign you're not onto something. Because you can't even get them to spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes with you, how are you ever going to convince them to buy your product? So that's the first sign whether or not even your intention is sort of aimed in a spot that the market cares about. Then we think about themes, possible themes that you want to learn more about, and then your interview questions. So pull from those themes, asking 1 or 2 open-ended, genuinely curious questions about the themes that you want to explore. And then on the right-hand side of this guide, or of the worksheet, is a guide that gives you some insights into how to ask effective questions, how to conduct these interviews in a way that maximize the data that comes back from the people you're interviewing. So we'll dive into this here in a minute, pretty hands-on. Because we're doing multiple of these interviews, the key is we want to be able to step back and start to see patterns. We've got this raw data from the interviews that when you do these, transcribe almost, maybe not word for word like a medical transcription, but transcribe thematically pretty accurately what the other person says. And so when you get done with 40, 50, 100 of these interviews, you're going to have a lot of transcript. So the empathy map is a way to stand back and say, okay, given everything that we learned from all these interviews, what are the patterns that are showing up? And the specific patterns we want to focus on in the middle are, what did the people say? What stood out to you that people said? Don't think just about things that you heard over and over again. Also note outliers here. Outlier comments can be really powerful. So what did they say in the interview? What did you infer that they were thinking? Or maybe they were actually talking about the thoughts that they were having. If you're watching people do, in a work situation, so let's say your business involves certain activities, go visit your prospects, watch them do those activities, and do is where they either talk about what they did or you actually observing what they're doing. There's a piece of this which is, there's kind of a joke in knowledge management, which is we only know what we know in the moment when we need to know it. So if you ask somebody what they know, you'll get pretty crappy answers. If you watch them do something and have them sort of articulate or sort of talk to themselves about what they're thinking about, how they're approaching it, then you'll really get the knowledge that they have. So that's a trick if you're out in the field doing ethnographic type research where you're watching people work. And then the final box here is feel. So if you feel something in these interviews, or if the person describes their emotions in the situations that you're having them describe, note those there. Also note outliers as well as common patterns. So the center part there is where you're really pulling directly from the transcripts. Then on the edges, you're trying to infer what's going on around that direct lived experience. So there you're synthesizing out, okay, of the feelings, of the thoughts, of the actions, what represents tensions and anxieties? What makes them nervous? What's sort of keeping them stuck in the status quo? Because most new products, most new startups, your biggest competition is not the other 12 startups doing what you're sort of vaguely doing. The biggest competition is the status quo, the entrenched beliefs of your customers. And those generally show up as tensions and anxieties where they don't want to move away from the status quo. So note those there. Motivations. What's motivating them to take on a different way? So this is what's compelling them to get off the status quo and think about there's got to be a better way to solve this problem that I'm having or improve my experience. And then finally note the situations that these people are in as they're describing their lived experience. And we'll get back to the situation, why that's important here in a little bit. Then once you do this, stand back from it. I've done these where there's like 400 or 500 sticky notes on this huge mural on the wall. And the sticky notes represent direct quotes from the interviews. And then we stand back from it and we look for patterns. We say, okay, where's the signal? Where are the outliers here? Where are we getting insights? Where are we getting data that blends up with our insights, that give us a way of looking at the customer, at the prospect in a way that we maybe have never thought about before?
Just so you know, these forms are here on this website, this Techstars website. So you can have get the form that he's showing so much there.
So there's a group of students at Stanford, and they were given a design challenge of improving technology in third world environments. And the challenge they were given were specifically incubators in Nepal, in the third world. And the challenge was, okay, we hear that there's a high mortality rate among infants in the third world, and the presumption was, let's go build a cheap incubator. The assumed problem was, that the students assumed was, okay, well, this is the third world, probably the infrastructure isn't all that great, probably they don't have incubators to keep the babies warm, or if they do, they're broken, they have a hard time getting parts, but our suspicion is they just can't afford these incubators. And so they started on the design challenge, and the professor was like, wait, where's your direct experience here? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, where's your direct experience? Have you talked to doctors, nurses in the field in third world countries to check up your assumptions? And they're like, no. So they got on a plane, went to Nepal, rural Nepal, went to a hospital, said, hey, we're here to build better incubators for you. The doctor's like, okay, great, they're over there. And they looked at him and were like, well, there's a whole wall of incubators. What's wrong with the incubators? So one, they're like, great, they have incubators. That was a surprise. Number two, what's wrong with them? Because we don't see any babies in them. And the staff there said, oh, the incubators are totally fine. They work great. But the babies never make it here from the field in time to put them in the incubator to make a difference. So in that moment, they got data that was a complete reframe on what they thought. They thought the problem to solve was incubators were too expensive. And what they realized was the problem was the incubators are fine, but we don't have a solution for the 2 to 3 hours it takes the babies to make it from the location of birth to the hospital where they can be saved. So knowing this, they're like, okay, well, let's go out into the field. Let's go way out into the rural areas and look at what's going on. So they watched births, they understood the dynamics of what was happening, and what they realized was, we don't need a cheap, fancy incubator in a hospital. We need this. It's basically like a sleeping bag. So the reframe was, the problem is we have to keep the babies warm for 2 to 3 hours to get them to the hospital. If we do that, problem solved. So they built basically what looks like a sleeping bag for a newborn. Wrap it in there. There's a little gel pack that you boil. Put the gel pack in there. Good for 2 to 3 hours to keep the baby warm on the way to the hospital. So they built a few prototypes of this because, again, even the reframe knowing, this is the solution, wasn't good enough. So they built a bunch of prototypes to figure out, okay, is this going to work? Built prototypes, put them out in the field, Zero efficacy. Didn't work at all. And they're thinking material science is like, oh, is the fabric wrong? Did the gel pack fail? They go back out and they realize, no, why it's failing is the mothers are refusing to put their babies in the mobile incubator. I'm like, what in the world is that? There's a perfectly good solution. It's cheap, works great. Why in the world, moms, are you not using this? Well, you might also wonder, why in the world is there, in something that's supposed to be thermally complete, basically a window that is this huge area for heat to leave the sleeping bag? Well, in their culture, unless the moms can see the heart area of the baby, they were presuming that these bags were going to kill the kids. And that was a cultural artifact. That in the West, we totally missed that cultural artifact. So by making the solution much more ineffective thermally, it dramatically increased usage of the product. So sometimes get ourselves in our perfect engineering brains and we think, oh, it's all about we didn't build the solution perfectly. Now the reality here of why this initial prototype failed was they didn't have complete empathy for the moms and the social context and the cultural context of what they were building. So this device now has saved, I believe, about 200,000 or 300,000 kids in rural areas and helping them get to hospitals in time for medical attention. So this is the power of empathy, of doing research in the field to really understand the underlying problems, social context around the problem that you're trying to solve. So there's a group of students at Stanford, and they were given a design challenge of improving technology. Think about an area of your product development or your go-to-market where potentially you're struggling a little bit. You've got an idea of why something should be working, but maybe it's not working all that well. Or maybe there's a big unknown in your business that you want to put some data and some evidence behind, and you want to do some empathy interviews. So this worksheet will help you turn this sort of unknown, this need, this uncertainty, this dilemma into an interview that you can use to build evidence about the true nature of the situation. I'm going to guide you through each box. We'll take a couple minutes on each box, and then I'll bring us back together. So when you think about intention, what I want you to do is maybe one sentence there of what do you want to learn more about in your business that's either an unsolved solution, a problem, something you know you need to put some energy behind. Where would you like to go deeper in understanding with your prospects and your customers? So I want you to take 1 minute, discuss among your team, and fill in that box with one sentence. Okay, so hopefully you've got some intention that you want to explore. Next thing to think about is how are you going to reach your prospects or your customers that you want to interview? What are you going to say to them? Where are you going to find them? How are you going to get them interested in coming and spending 30 minutes chatting with you? So that's that middle left-hand box. Let's take another about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes to fill in that box. All right, got some ideas on how to get your prospects interested and where to find them and reach them? Next up, possible themes. What themes do you want to explore during the interview? So think about your intention. What are you trying to learn? And then think of 2, 3, 4 themes that you want to explore in more detail when you're talking with these prospects and customers. So we'll take a couple minutes, fill out 3 or 4 themes there. All right, hopefully now you've identified a few themes. In the sake of time, we're not going to explore all the themes, but what I want you to do is pick one theme and come up with 3 or 4 questions that you would like to ask related to that theme. So we're not going to go through all the themes. Eventually you would, but for just to give you some practice on each of these sections. Handful of questions you would want to ask to gain empathy around the theme you're exploring. And look at the interview guide on the right-hand side of the worksheet. That'll give you some helpful tips on how to frame the questions. The big thing is to frame them in very open-ended and curious ways. So imagine you know nothing about their experience, and you're there really asking open questions to solicit stories from them and lived experiences from them. So you've got some questions, but let's learn a little bit more about how these interviews, how to think about and structure the interviews. I'm going to have a couple helpers come up and do a little role playing here with this. And some applause for our volunteers, please. So what we're going to do here is do a little bit of role playing around these interviews. Beck, you're going to be asking the questions, right? Hannah, you're going to be playing the role of a potential customer, potential prospect. So we understand our roles here. I'll let them do kind of the interview here, and then I'll say time out. And what I'll do is I'll break in and kind of do the color commentary on what I'm observing. And then I'll say time in, and then we'll kind of go back into role playing. So we've got a couple of trained improv artists here, so I think we'll be good. All right, so time in.
So don't you think that prefab homes would be a great way to go on this land?
I don't know if I know enough about what a prefab home is, but maybe.
Well, but wouldn't it be great if your house came more complete than if you had to find all the pieces yourself?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds nice.
All right, let's do time out here. So on those last two questions, really good leading questions. So the challenge here is, so Hannah was sort of following along. And if you have a reality distortion field, which is really you're bought in on the fact that this is a problem, I heard Hannah being nice, which is oh yeah, that's kind of an issue maybe. And it's super easy for Beck to think, oh, I'm onto something. Finally, I'm talking to somebody who needs what I'm selling. Confirmation. Off we go. And this is the danger in doing these really biased interview tactics, is that it's super easy for you to hear, yeah, that sounds reasonable, with, oh, strong signal, we are on to something now. So that's the danger. All right, so now let's shift gears a little bit, and now we'll role play a little bit of a different style, which is much more of an open kind of story-provoking, this place where we're not able to confuse ourselves with some signal with positive signal. So time in.
So tell me more about the vision. What do you think it'll be like?
My future house?
Your future house, on land with the garden.
Well, I always had a dream to have friends or family nearby, so maybe sharing land or having different plots with kind of more of community style, so not totally alone, but we could share a garden or something. I'm really into simplicity, and so I just picture it very peaceful and simple.
That's so cool. I have a really similar dream. I love the idea of living with family and friends nearby. But, do you know who would be there, or do you think it just how will it work? Who's going to join you?
Well, that's where it gets more complicated. There's definitely some buy-in. I have lots of friends that are yeah, I'm into that too, but I don't believe how into it they are, because, it's kind of a big commitment to live near or with someone. So I don't really know that part.
What does simple mean to you, if you don't mind telling me? What does it look like?
No clutter. Kind of just surrounding myself with things that bring me joy. Lots of light and plants.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can you see the property in your mind? Do you know what it looks like?
Yeah, there's lots of trees and grass and maybe a stream going through.
So what keeps you from making this vision a reality?
I don't know how to get from here to there. I'm really afraid of, one, permits. I live in Boulder County, and it's just I feel everything's not allowed. You just can't do what you want to do. So that seems really overwhelming to navigate that.
Cool, let's do a timeout here. All right, what did you notice at the very beginning there? I heard a pretty open question that kind of would elicit a story. The next part was really powerful. This sort of confirmation, the connection, the empathy, building rapport of like, oh yeah, you know, I've experienced that too. I relate to you. So that sense of connecting there, then followed by another really crisp, open-ended question to tell a story. So notice the difference there between the first ones, which were very leading, of, hey, would you like a house with that? To these, which are much more about, tell me a story, what's going on around your world. The other piece that was powerful in there is there was some inquiry around the functional elements of a home. There was inquiry around the social elements of a home and living, the dynamics around that. And then finally, some inquiry around the emotion of it. So what's going on at the functional surface, which those of us who are engineers, it's super easy for us to just get stuck at the functional surface level. But this one went down into the social component and then all the way down into the emotional component. So a really powerful way to traverse that, all the while building empathy, building connection, building a sense of rapport with each question. The other thing that I heard that I thought was pretty powerful was ask a question, and then Beck was completely silent. There was head nodding, there was that notion of eye contact and connection, but there was no sort of breaking in, like I'm already done with what you're saying, I'm ready, I got the next question loaded up, I'm ready to go. So give space. It's the hardest thing when you do these interviews, is to give space for the person to answer, and then give a little bit of space for awkward silence. Because in that awkward silence is often where you'll get a little extra nugget of what's going on for the person. Thank you so much for doing the role playing, really appreciate it.
Okay. Hey, Allison, how you doing today? All right.
I think I muted
If I
myself.
can,
I'm doing well.
okay,
Doing well.
good to see you.
Good to be back.
All right.
Good to be back.
Good, thank you. Couple things here. As I mentioned, all these worksheets are in the member resources under the Techstars Entrepreneurs Toolkit. So if you want to do this sort of thing, you can find the forms right there. But really, my goal in sharing this is not so much how you would actually do this. It's just the idea of doing something like this, getting some idea of your customers or your prospects' perspective on what you're doing. And one of the things that you'll find if you do this, even if you do it by Zoom or, you know, FaceTime or some other method that, you know, allows you to talk to the people and see them and them to see you, is you might be surprised by what your prospect or customer thinks about what you're doing. It may be very different than in what's in your mind. And that's the biggest benefit of this process. Even if you don't, you know, seek out 40 or 50 customers, like they said in the video, I'm not sure that's that practical, but they haven't even attempted to get feedback. It's more this mentality of I build it, they will come. You know, if I make the product, then and it something that I like, then it'll work. And there are countless stories of people who are just amazed that their stuff didn't sell. And usually it's because you really haven't figured out what is the problem that you're trying to solve. You know, in our video yesterday with Simon Sinek talking about our why, one of the overriding things in our why is what problem are we answered, you know, and very, very clearly, and you have to have some input from your potential customers or your actual customers. And this sort of thing can be done lots of different ways. I think some people do surveys, some people do kind of follow-ups. You might even offer some sort of gift or some extra benefit for people who give you feedback. These are all different ways to get to the same place, and that is to have a good sense of what is it that you're trying to solve? What need are you addressing? And be really careful, like in that example of the two women answering the questions. The first set of questions were all leading questions. She was trying to get the person to say what she wanted that person to say. And the second set of questions was much more empathetic. It was trying to elicit from this person what it is that they dreamed about or they care about. And, I don't want to over dramatize it, and make it like you're going to solve all the world's problems. You're not. But if you can intelligently understand what problem you're addressing, it will make you very powerful in your conversations. When you talk to people, come through loud and clear, and it will brand you. It will get you in the customer's mind what it is that you're doing. And so that's really the message in this. We're going to go ahead and do the second half of this tomorrow, but I did want to point out that the purpose of this is really get you thinking about how do I get a handle on the problem that I'm solving. What's my why? What am I doing about it? How am I doing it? And
did Dennis just leave?
Think he dropped.
Wow.
Okay. I'm gonna guess he's gonna come back just because he wasn't done. So we'll give him a couple minutes, I guess. That's all right with everyone.
Sure.
Yep, it's cool with me.
All right, I don't want to hold anyone else up. Since we're gonna be going over part 2 tomorrow anyways, I guess we can go ahead and call it, and anything Dennis wanted to kind of add at the end, we can talk about tomorrow, before we talk about part 2, if that works for everyone.
Sure. Sounds good.
Awesome. Sorry
All right,
about
guys,
that.
have a great day. See you tomorrow. Hey, no worries. Have a great one, Grant. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Bye, everyone.